Hi, this is Mark Irwin, and this is a brief introduction to the Garmin 430 GPS unit. What I've modeled here is similar to what is in 784 Sierra Papa in the Advantage Aviation fleet. And I've just powered up the aircraft, and as you see, initially after I turn on the avionics switch, there's an initial screen that comes on to the 430 giving us the information on the latest database that's been entered into the unit. This is showing it's current through 5/25 of 17, so it's current, so that's good. See the flashing okay. Now I'm going to be going through the buttons here in just a second as the first step. But to get through this okay, I'm going to hit enter, which is right here, enter, and then it takes me to another screen which verifies that the CDI, the needles over here, are half deflected up and half deflected to the left, making sure that it's talking correctly to the OBS. And I'm going to hit enter for yes, and then it takes me to a screen that gives me the satellite coverage, and then goes to the moving map. Across the bottom there are 5 buttons. CDI, standing for Course Deviation Indicator. OBS, standing for Omnidirectional Bearing Selector, which is a unit such as this. Message, MSG. Flight Plan, FPL. And Procedure, PROC, or sometimes called the PROC button. Of these 5, the ones that you'll be using most frequently would be CDI, occasionally the message button, if in case there is a flashing annunciator above the message button, you'd press that to see what it was trying to tell you. And then finally later FPL, standing for Flight Plan. The OBS button and the procedure buttons are more advanced features that won't be covered in this presentation. They have more to do with IFR flying than VFR, so the OBS button and procedure button won't be covered. Up to the right here we have the range up and down buttons. These are effective when you get back to your moving map, and I just got out of it. Let me get back to my moving map, and hitting down, ranging in, ranging out, hitting the up button. To the lower left of that we have what looks to be a D with an arrow through it. That's the direct to button. Below that we have clear. Now in the moving map function, if we hit clear, it does what we call declutter. It takes us through 3 levels or 3 or 4 levels of decluttering, eliminating waypoints, making it more readable in some cases. So that's your option. In other screens, clear would do as you might expect. It clears out data that you may have entered, like a waypoint. If you made an incorrect spelling, you could just hit clear and delete that, or you could take a waypoint out of a flight plan using clear button. We'll demonstrate that later. On the upper right then we have menu. On various screens, menu will bring up a list of selections that might apply specifically to those screens to customize them or give you additional capabilities. But for this presentation, we probably won't be dealing too much with the menu button. And finally, enter button, which is what we used at the very beginning here to cycle through those initial splash screens after powering up the unit. On the lower right, we have 2 concentric knobs, an inner and an outer knob. And you can think of these knobs, the outer knob being what we would term the mover knob, and the inner knob being the changer knob. And you'll see more what I'm talking about as we get into entering waypoints into flight plans and things of that nature. In addition to being able to rotate the knobs, if we push, like I'm going to come over here to the flight plan window and I'll show you, if we push the center knob in, it brings up the cursor. And that's the first step in being able to enter a waypoint into a flight plan, is being able to push that cursor on and off. Okay, so and again, you rotate outer inner knobs, and you can also push that button to push the knob to bring up a cursor. Okay. Then over on the left half of the radio here, we have the COM1, NAV1 functions. COM1 is the upper two lines here with the shaded box being your standby frequency. That is the frequency, that is the area in which you would enter in your frequencies using the concentric knobs on the left here. The outer knob will control the integers. So, and by the way, throughout this demonstration, throughout this presentation, you'll occasionally see a keypad come up, which is unique to this simulator. This has nothing to do with the 430 itself. It's just that the simulator developers had incorporated this keypad as a means of more easily entering frequencies rather than using the knobs. But I want to demonstrate the knobs themselves, so I'm going to hit that clear. And it comes right back up, so just ignore that. But looking at the frequency, I'm turning the outer knob right now over here. Just imagine you're turning the outer knob. That's changing the integers on the radio frequency. Then if I grab the inner knob, that'll change the decimal, the hundredths, the tenths and the hundredths. So if I want to enter in, say, ground frequency of 125.0, I can go backward, 125, and then 0. Okay, and there you go, right there. Okay, I've entered the frequency into standby. It isn't active yet until I hit the flip-flop button, which is the C button here. We could refer to this as the flip-flop button, C standing for COM, and I'll hit that once and it brings it up, and now it's in the active frequency. Like other airplanes, of course, whether or not you're using COM1 or in this case we have a King radio as our COM2 stack, we will select either radio using the audio panel. Right now we're selecting COM1 Mic 1, which is the 430 unit. COM2 Mic 2 would be the King radio down below. Okay. Similarly, if we want to enter a VOR frequency rather than COM, the upper two lines here are the COM radio. Then down below we have the navigation radio, NAV1, which is associated with the OBS1 right next to it. We can enter a frequency into the VOR the fields by first pressing the inner knob here, similar to what we did over here to bring up a cursor, but in this case we press that knob to bring the cursor down to the VOR line, and then we can enter in again integers, and with the outer knob, and decimals with the outer knob. 113.9 is Woodside VOR. Okay, clear that out. Okay, so again, you can cycle back and forth between NAV1 and COM1 by pressing the inner knob here. Normally you'll stay on COM1 for most of the flight. Then finally we have two little knobs, rotational knobs up here for C and V. These are your volume knobs for COM, and then in the event you're trying to listen to the voice capability of a VOR frequency, you would be using the volume knob, the V knob in association with the VOR frequencies. One unique aspect to the volume knob is if you press it, you'll see right here you can bring up ID, which if you press NAV1 on the auto panel will enable you to hear the Morse code identifier for the VOR. I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but it's giving us the Morse code. Again, to get that, you'd have to press the volume button to get ID. If I turn that off now, you no longer hear the Morse code, but if I press it to get ID showing there, you'll hear the Morse code. Okay, I'm going to turn off nav 1. And that pretty much covers the buttons and the knobs of the Garmin 430. So we've powered up the airplane. We're sitting in the run-up area at runway 31 at Palo Alto. Let's imagine that we're preparing for a departure. We're going to do a right dumbar departure. And so we brought up the 430. It's now showing us the moving map. And we're going to get this plane underway. We'll start to fly, and then during the course of flight I'll begin to explain some other features to the 430 that you'll be using in typical VFR flight. Let me go to COM 2. I'm on COM 2. I'm going to listen to the ATIS. Let's go 135.275. Using the King radio. Flipping it over.
Gallo, other information, Oscar. 1400 Zulu weather. Wind calm. Visibility 7. Sky clear. Temperature 23. Viewpoint 1. Altimeter 2992. Arriving and departing runway 31. Advise on initial contact. You have Oscar.
We have Oscar. I'm going to put in ground frequency on COM 2. This is the convention we normally use, using COM 2 for both ATIS and ground. Okay, here we go. Flipping over. Now I'm on ground. Now I would say Palo Alto ground, Cessna. Today we're going to be 74 Sierra Papa. Cessna 74 Sierra Papa is Advantage Aviation. Taxi runway 31. We have information Papa. Then they would say, Roger, Cessna 74 Sierra Papa, Palo Alto ground, taxi runway 31 terminal side. And we'd say taxi runway 31 terminal side, 74 Sierra Papa. So we taxied out. Now we've done the run up, and now we're going to flip over to tower frequency on COM 1, and we're going to go to COM 1 from the audio panel. And I always like to check my volume to make sure it's up and that someone else hasn't turned it down. Now before we depart here, after our initial climb, we're going to turn to a heading of 050, so I'm going to set that over here, 050 roughly. And let's climb to, we're going to climb to 4,500 feet eventually. Initially we have to stay below the 2,500 foot shelf of Bravo airspace. So here we go. We have our transponders set, flaps are up, mixture's rich. And we're going to say Palo Alto Tower, Cessna 74 Sierra Papa, ready for departure, runway 31, right dumbar departure. We go, Roger, 74 Sierra Papa, Palo Alto Tower, winds are 310 at 12, runway 31, clear for takeoff. We say clear for takeoff, runway 31, 4 Sierra Papa. Okay, landing lights on, strobes on, and police parking brake, and now we're taxiing on, and now we're taking off. Okay, here we go. Now I'm not showing you the flight screens above because I wanted to highlight the instruments themselves. If you ever have a chance to come into the office, I'll be happy to demonstrate the full use of the simulator. Here we go, rotate, and we're going to climb out VY, which is 74 knots for this airplane. Okay, pitching up for about 74 knots. Okay, making sure we're using enough right rudder to keep the ball centered. Staying on our runway heading. Okay. Now at this point, I'm going to go, well, let's see, just on my hand just a second here. I'm getting a little slow, aren't I? So I need to pitch down. Get that airspeed back to my full power climb. Pitching down, looking at my pitch indicator. About 10 degrees should give me about VY. 10 degrees. Okay, we're at 1,000 feet. I'm going to make my turn to heading of 050, continuing to climb up to 2000. At this point I'm going to turn on the autopilot so I can focus more on talking about the 430. Now as you see here, the moving map is showing us where we are. Right now we're below, I don't know if you can see this, but you can see the outline of the Bravo shelf, which is 2,500. I'm going to once I get to 2,000, excuse me, I'm going to level off. And now I'm going to bring my power back a little bit. I'm going to level off by pushing the Alt button on the autopilot. We've talked about this in previous lessons. Okay, right there. And I'm leveling off on a heading of 050 and 2000. Again, until I see the plane get out from underneath this 2,500 foot shelf, at which point I'll start another climb up to 4,500. Well, I'm sorry, 3,500. Because after the 2,500 foot shelf, we'll be underneath the 4,000 foot shelf. So and right about here, I think I can begin my climb. I climb at 500 feet per minute, go full power, and go up to 3,500. Okay. So at this point, now we've talked about the buttons. I'm now going to talk about the chapter page structure that underlies the whole 430 scheme here, the logic. There are 4 chapters. You can think of them as chapters in a book, each of which has a number of pages. Right now we're in the nav chapter, and we're on page 2 because the second block is in white, and the other ones are not. So we're on page 2 of the nav chapter, which is the moving map. I can change pages within the chapter using the inner knob over here and rotating and cycle between the various pages. Now, of all the pages under nav, the ones you'll be using most often would be nav page 1 and nav page 2, which is the moving map. Nav page 1 gives you more quantifiable data relating to your flight plan, and right now it's not showing us much. It's showing us our track over the ground. It's showing us our our ground speed, I believe. Yep, ground speed. It's not showing us anything else because we haven't yet programmed in any waypoint that we're going to. So it's just giving us the track and ground speed at this point. Remember that the track on GPS is your track over the ground. It's not necessarily the direction that the plane is pointing. That would be a function of what, if any, crosswinds you have. In fact, I'm going to go up here just momentarily here. I'm going to put in some crosswind just to to make that point. Okay, I've just put in a fair amount of crosswind actually, and it's going to take a minute to stabilize. Okay. Alright, so currently we're flying a heading of 050, but our actual track over the ground is 059, almost 60 degrees. So it's almost a 10-degree difference between our track and our heading. So that is purely the result of the crosswind. Our airspeed right now is 110 knots, but yet the ground speed is showing 120 knot ground speed. So that means we have roughly a 10 knot tailwind as well as the crosswind from the left. Okay, it should be leveling off here at 3,500, and sure enough, there we go. Okay. I'm going to turn down the plane noise a little bit. So we've talked about the nav chapter. To cycle between the chapters or advance through the chapters, you use the outer knob up here, what we refer to as the mover knob. So I'm going to move to the next chapter, which is Waypoint, which has a number of pages under Waypoint, aux, which you may have a reason to use, but not often, and then finally nearest, which you will on occasion. So let's go back to nav, and I'll highlight those pages you'll likely use. Nav, page 1 is your trip data. Number 2 is your moving map, which you can range in and out. I'm going to range that out. You can see the rings of Bravo airspace. I'm going to go to Waypoint chapter. Under Waypoint, of all those pages, you're most likely going to use just page 3, which are the frequencies. You know, if you have a destination airport dialed into the, or fed into the 430, it will give you those frequencies for your destination airport. You can, if you push the cursor, you can opt to, spell the any airport you want and pull up the frequencies. So you can manually select any airport you'd like, and I'll do that later just to demonstrate. So Waypoint chapter 3, moving over to aux. I said we're not going to use that very frequently, but under nearest, immediately page 1 comes up as nearest airports. That again will come in handy. Nav page 1, I'm sorry, nearest page 1, and then nearest page 4, rotating the little knob, inner knob that is, you can go advance to the VOR page, which is nearest VORs. So right now, let's say I wanted to go to, and this is going to incorporate now another button I just introduced earlier, called the Direct To button. If I push the knob to get the cursor to show up here, and I rotate the mover knob down, I'm going to move it down to select the VOR, Manteca VOR, which is out near Stockton. So I've highlighted that VOR, and I'm going to go direct, enter, enter. And now I have a course set up directly to Manteca VOR, as you can see by that magenta line as I scroll out. Now that I've done that, if I go back to nav chapter 1, you now see we have additional data giving us the distance to our destination, our desired track, and ground speed. Now the bearing is what we're flying. That would be the same as our heading, where we're pointing. But the track is really what we want. And ideally we'd like to keep our track the same as desired track. I'm sorry, the bearing is the bearing to the station, not our heading. But right now we're heading in a direction of the 051 heading, and that's taking us further and further off our track, as evidenced by this also has a CDI at the top that shows us our progress. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to recenter that line by hitting direct enter, enter again, and I'm going to go onto nav on the autopilot, and I'm going to begin to steer that course. You'll see that as I do this, the track should then begin to come very close to, if not equaling, the desired track, and that would mean that we're right on our course. So if I go again back to our moving map, it gives us a good idea of what we're flying. Back to nav 1, page 1 that is. And now you can see the track is, has become very close to, it should, in the plane it will equal the desired track. It'll do the same. Let me recenter that one more time. Oops. Hang on a minute. Not sure what happened there. So there are different ways to use this direct to button. You can use it in conjunction with the nearest screen, just as I've done. I can go over, use the big knob, go all the way over to the nearest chapter, go to the airport page. I'm going to turn off that cursor, because if the cursor is working, the knobs won't bring you back, won't change the pages. And say instead I wanted to go to a certain airport, I would press the cursor, rotate the big knob down to whatever airport I want to go to. Let's just say I want to go to, I'm going down the list here. That's about as far as it's going to take me. Okay, I'm going to go to, I'll go to this, I'll go back to, let's go to Reed. No, let's not go there. Let's go to Tracy. Tracy, direct, enter, enter. And now we're flying direct to Tracy. It's 14 miles in front of us, and now there are ways to set up the fields, to customize those fields. I'm not sure if I can do that in here. Change fields. I just hit the menu button. I can rotate that down, hit enter, and I can rotate. I'm going to change the field on this one here. I'm going to hit enter. Oops. Now let's move this back and rotate the little knob. And I want ETA time. Enter. Okay. Now let's do this. Estimated time en route. Enter. Okay, that's good. I'll turn that off. So now I've changed the field. So now, in addition to everything else, I've set this so it will give me the time to get to Tracy at our current airspeed. So that's one way you can use the menu knob on certain screens, is you can customize the fields or change the settings in some other way to suit your taste. Okay, we're on nav mode, and we're 5 minutes away. Now, what if we wanted to know the frequencies for Tracy? Well, we don't. We could get them off the paper chart, but we also can get them directly off the database of the G1000. Let's go to Waypoint chapter. We talked about the Waypoint chapter being right after nav, so I'm going to take the outer knob and go over to Waypoint, and under frequencies here, all it's giving me right now is, that's not even the correct frequency. So the database in this simulator sometimes isn't completely accurate, unlike what it would be in the airplane. Let's go to a different airport. Let's go back to nearest, outer knob all the way to the right, and let's go to, let's see if we can get a better set of frequencies somewhere. Let's go to Reed Hillview, KRHV, direct, enter, enter. Okay, now we're going to turn all the way around, bring up the moving map. So we've set up a new course directly to Reed Hillview. Notice too, if you're familiar with the Tracy area, you see the restricted area is depicted right on the moving map, which is a huge advantage, being able to see all this airspace. So now we're going to Reed Hillview. How long is it going to take for us to get there? At our current speed, I'll bring my power back. That would help. Okay, our desired track to get to Reed Hillview is 1907, and as we turn, you see that this number is coming up, and it should then get close to being the same. I'm going to climb up I'm going to climb up to 4,500 now, since I'm going in a westerly direction. Appropriate altitude would be even plus 500, and I'm going to go 500 feet. Okay, up at 400 feet per minute. Okay, so it's saying about roughly 9 minutes to get there. So let's take a look at the frequencies for Reed Hillview, see if we can pull those up. So we're in the nav chapter, using the outer knob here, go to Waypoint, and we have all the various frequencies here, not picking up ATIS. Normally the ATIS frequency would be shown here also, but again, that's just a a shortcoming of the database of the simulator here. But let's just go ahead and push the knob to get the cursor, and you see it shows up at the airport, and rotate the outer knob to get it down to the tower frequency. And this was pretty slick. Watch this. I've highlighted the tower frequency. I'm going to press the enter button, and it's going to feed it directly into the standby of the COM1. Okay, and then I can just simply flip it up. So it saves a lot of button pushing. Now you could manually, of course, change the knobs. You may enter the frequency manually, but I just want to show you that there is an ability to enter it directly off the database. Okay, so let's go back to, now if at any point in time you want to get back to your, you could be buried in the various layers of this thing. If you press and hold the clear button, it will take you back to the default screen, which in this case is the trip information screen, as I call it. It's probably got another name, but, and I'm going to go back to the moving map. So according to our compass and our heading indicator, we're currently flying a heading of about 205, and we're tracking 198. So again, the plane is pointing significantly more to the right than what we're tracking, and that just indicates the crosswind from the right, the wind correction angle in essence. We're also reading about 111 knots. And our going back to this, our ground speed is 127. So again, we've picked up we still have a tailwind behind us of a major proportion. Okay. So again, it's your choice as to whether or not you want to, be looking at that screen versus the moving map screen. The moving map screen is most beneficial in my mind in terms of being able to visually, get the airspace that you're getting close to. If I went back to moving map and I zoomed out, I could see here that I'm getting closer to the first ring of Bravo airspace, although I'm not going to be underneath it. There is a way, I can't show you here in the simulator, but there is a way with these knobs here you can push the cursor and get it to actually give you the dimensions of the upper and lower limits of these airspace shelves. So there is a way to get that using those inner and outer knobs on the right. So up to now we've talked about the buttons and knobs on the 430. We've talked about the chapter and page structure of the screens that you can access. The last thing I wanted to talk about would be the VORs again, and use of the CDI or the OBS in conjunction with the 430. The CDI button right here, right now, if we push it and it's showing GPS above it, which means that this CDI right here, I'm going to refer to as a CDI, course deviation indicator, is showing us our position relative to our GPS course. Okay. In this mode, I could turn this knob here and nothing will happen with the deflection of that needle because it's looking strictly at the GPS course and whether or not we're on it or to the left or right of it. I can make this OBS or the CDI act in a more conventional, fashion with respect to VOR if I push the CDI to VLOC. Okay. Now it's navigating based on VOR and not GPS. So if I go back to GPS, okay, I'll reestablish this. Oh, I see what happened. I knocked myself off the autopilot, which is generally the case. In most autopilots, if you're on nav mode, and I think I talked about this in the earlier video on the CAP 140 autopilot, but most autopilots behave this way. If you change your navigational source while the autopilot is on nav mode, you will cause the autopilot to disengage because it gets confused, doesn't know what you want to do. So the best remedy to that is to first center the heading bug on your present heading, then move to heading mode, and now we can change the CDI to VOR, and it's also showing VOR in the initial panel up here. Earlier at the very beginning, I entered in the frequency for Woodside VOR. So now the OBS will act in a more conventional fashion, giving us the to from indicator and whether or not how we are and what radial we're currently on. So if I turn this to 2, I want to go to the VOR. This is kind of sensitive, so I'm going to bring this out. And it looks to be like we're on about the 250 radial roughly, and I'm going to go on nav mode, and it's going to steer that now. So we've gotten completely away from our GPS direct to course, and now we're flying off of the 250. We're flying the 250 radial. I'm sorry. In this case, it would be the reciprocal. It would be the 070 radial to the VOR, because again, all radials move outward away from the VOR, and if we're flying to the VOR, then if we want to know what radial we're flying, we have to look at the bottom rather than the top. If we're flying away from the VOR, then the radial that we're on is at the top, because we're flying away, and that's consistent with the direction that radials move away from the VOR. Okay, now that we're established in flight here, I was going to demonstrate the flight planning features. Now this is something that actually you would most likely do on the ground as opposed to in the air. You establish your flight plan, you feed it, enter the flight plan in on the ground at your departure airport before you take off, and then during flight you might have an occasion to modify it, which can be done. But I'm going to pretend like we're on the ground at Palo Alto. So I bring up flight plan. It would initially show us our destination. Departure airport, and I'm going to put in a couple waypoints here now. Just for the sake of the demonstration, I'll demonstrate inputting the first waypoint using the inner and outer knobs as you would with the airplane. But then, for time considerations, I'll use the keypad in the simulator for the rest of these, just to get on to the next point. So, in order to start entering waypoints into the GPS flight plan, you first have to bring up the cursor. Otherwise, these knobs are not effective. Once you have the cursor blinking, then you rotate the outer knob, the mover knob, down to the next empty field, and then rotate the inner knob to begin spelling your waypoint. I'm going to pick SJC. Now let's see. I'm going to pick SJC. That would be San Jose VOR. Moving over here. Okay, this is. Hang on a minute. It's a little hard with this keypad here, but oops. Oh, brother. Okay, there we go. SJC. So you're moving the inner knob to J, outer knob to next field over, and then inner knob to C, then enter, and that enters the waypoint into your flight plan. So from San Jose, I want to go to an intersection called Sunol. So I'm going to go to VP Sun, which is the Sunol Golf Course. It's a VFR checkpoint. So I'm going to type in VP. Again, this is just for ease of entry in the simulator. Oops, it doesn't have that in the database. Okay, let's go to Sunol then. That's actually an intersection out there. SUNOL. Enter. And then I'm going to go to Concord Airport. KCCR. Wouldn't it be nice? Now, some of the newer planes, like the newer Cirrus Perspective and the Corvallis TT, and the Cessna TTX, they do have keypad entry capability for the exits. The Garmin, it's a newer version of the Garmin 1000, the G1000, that's called the Perspective. But unfortunately, in the older airplanes that have 430s, we don't have the keypad as such, so we're limited to using the entering these points using the knobs. Okay, anyway, this is the flight plan, and I can push the cursor and then scroll it back up to the first point and turn off the cursor. There's our flight plan. Now, right now it's showing me going direct to Reed Hillview. I'm going to cancel that out by hitting direct menu, enter. Okay, so now go back to our flight plan. And that magenta bracket indicates the first active leg of the flight plan. And if I were to go to my moving map and zoom in here, you see that, maybe it's not easy to see, but Palo Alto, let me grab a pen here to point out. Palo Alto is right here, San Jose VOR is right here. We're going in the opposite direction, so I'm going to use the heading bug, I'm going to first center the heading bug to get us turned around that direction. Heading, and I'm going to turn this back to a direction to intercept that course. Okay, so Palo Alto's up here, San Jose VOR is down here, and then the rest of the flight plan appears as white segments as opposed to the magenta segment of the leg, which the magenta leg is the active leg in the flight plan, which coincides with that magenta bracket that I showed you. I'm going to bring this around a little bit further. Okay, and I'm going to activate the nav. Oops. No, I'm not going to do that. No, not quite yet. Sorry about this. Just trying to get this set up. Okay, as soon as we're established on this course, I'm going to go to nav mode on the autopilot, and that'll intercept that course leg. There we go. So now it's intercepting, and I'm going to zoom out now just to talk about this flight plan. So the first leg is shown in magenta. The subsequent legs of the flight plan are in white, bold white. So from San Jose to Sunol is right here, and Sunol going up to Concord is there. I can see what the problem was, is I had it on VOR. Interesting. That's a good demonstration. Okay. Now, in order for me to, let's see, I'm going to go back to heading mode here. Okay, so I've entered the flight plan, Palo Alto to SJC, and then from San Jose, SJC to Sunol, and then on up to Concord. So right now, I'm not on the course line. If I zoom in here, I'm just flying a heading right now. In order for me to capture this course and fly it, I first have to make sure right now I'm on the VLOC, which is VOR, and I need to make sure that's on GPS. And then I'm going to steer the plane over about 30 degrees over to capture this course, and then I'm going to activate the nav feature on the autopilot, and that'll capture it. So this is just to demonstrate how the Garmin 430 can be used in conjunction with the autopilot and actually fly your entire flight plan for you. Once it reaches the end of the first leg, the next leg you'll see will become active. It will turn magenta and will become the active leg, and the airplane will make that turn onto the next leg. Now, of course, you could manually fly this, and because we're in GPS mode, the OBS here is showing our relationship to our orientation to the next leg here, and our next leg, it hasn't cycled yet. Okay, hang on. Watch, it's going to turn magenta any second now. Okay, now it just changed, so that one became active. It's always a good practice, even though it has no effect. Our desired track is 009. It's always a good practice to keep that in make sure that agrees. I'm going to dial in 009 right here, just to keep that in sync with this. Although, as I mentioned before, churning that OBS is not going to have any it has no bearing on the needle orientation or the deflection. It doesn't change the deflection of that needle. But anyway, just wanted to show you. You'll have more practice in the airplane. It's easier to get it once you're able to get your hands on it and actually physically do the entry of the waypoints. I know it's somewhat difficult to make this out just by watching a demonstration on a simulator like this. But if you just know that there is a way under FPL to enter in waypoints and to have then, and to weave these together into a trip going to somewhere else between various waypoints, either whether you hand fly it or allow the autopilot to fly it, it's just a very efficient way to get there. And then, of course, if we go back to our main map, go to page 1, this will show us our destination to the next waypoint. I mean, sorry, not destination, but the time to the next waypoint. And that's about it. If you have any questions, like I said, schedule a flight. We probably will spend a few minutes here on the simulator in the office before going out for a flight, just to make sure that it's all fresh in your mind. But then getting out to the airplane and going for a short flight, we'll go out to the, we'll start the airplane, get into the 430, set up a simple flight plan, just as we've done here. We'll take off, and then we'll work with the, flying the GPS course, and then maybe switch over to a VLOC, and then track a VOR radial. I'll have you get some frequencies out of the 430 using Waypoint page 3. We'll then maybe go direct to an airport using the nearest airport page, bringing up the cursor, hitting direct to, and going that direction. And so by the end of that flight, it'll take some practice obviously, but by the end of the flight I think you'll be a lot more comfortable with the 430, and you'll start to be, you'll certainly begin to see how powerful it can be in terms of enhancing your navigation capabilities.